Good evening, everyone. And just give me a couple of seconds to get us going on YouTube. Where we will be going live. Okay, it says users not enabled for live screening or streaming. All right, so if we can't do YouTube, I told you guys I am a rookie at this, but anyway, we will move forward and see if we can do Facebook.
Yes, I know you're making noises.
Lee, are your dogs talking?
Yeah, my dog is talking to me.
What breed is it this time?
It's a yellow lab.
Ah, yeah.
He's
My training dogs are outside. They may have to come in around 8 o'clock or something. Because they live in the office here. So
Okay.
they're out
All
free.
right, well,
They're out free running with the wife right now.
yeah.
Okay. Well, I want to take the opportunity to thank everyone for joining our live Zoom meeting that is entitled Freedom and Another Set of Eyes, Living with Vision Impairment. And this meeting is sponsored by Healthy Living with a Vision Foundation, which is a 501c3 non-for-profit whose mission is to eliminate healthcare disparities in communities of color. And this is the fourth in our series on low vision and vision impairment, because this is one of those secret kind of unspoken things that is very, very common in our community. And I myself am a reformed under-referring optometrist. So basically, we see a lot of people with diabetes, glaucoma, that have lost a lot of their functional vision. And basically, not only myself, but many doctors would say, that's all we can do. So sorry, and excuse the patients. When with this whole series, it has become a passion of mine to let people know there's a lot that can be done to help the quality of life living with vision impairment. And we know that vision is probably one of the senses that most people just don't want to, you know, are most afraid of losing. So I would encourage people to go to our website, healthylivingwithavision.org, and please press the donate button and do whatever you can so we can keep these town hall meetings going. And so what I'm going to do now is introduce our panelists. We try to keep this at about an hour, but I'm going to tell you, we have such high energy panelists here and experts that I am just so excited to have. First of all, my name again is Dr. Ansel Johnson. I am the CEO and founder of Healthy Living with a Vision Foundation. I serve on several boards, but again, this is not about me. This is about, I want to get to our guests. Our first super advocate is Janet Lebrecht, and Janet Lebrecht hails from Boston right now, and she was nominated in 2013 under the Barack Obama administration, and is known as a national thought leader and keynote presenter to the Commission of Rehabilitative Services Administration that is within the Department of Education. And in 2013, she was confirmed by the US Senate as Commissioner of Rehabilitative Service Administration. In 2017, the New England College of Optometry, where I was trained, dedicated the Janet Lebrecht Center for Low Vision Rehabilitation in honor of recognizing her commitment and dedication to the field of blindness. And most recently, she has established the Lebrecht Consulting LLC, in addition to being the founder of Synergy Consulting Partners. Our next panelist is Dr. Susan Primo, who is professor of ophthalmology and director of optometry and low vision services at Emory Eye Center and Emory University in Atlanta, Georgia. And she has her doctorate of optometry from the New England College of Optometry. And she believes that strategic public health approaches to address vision impairment are extremely important. And she's a huge advocate, not only in her day-to-day clinical practices, but in terms of being in position to combat low vision and increase people's knowledge on it. Now, our two special guest panelists today is Eric Laurie, and he's executive director and co-founder and special needs of guide dog mobility instructor of Freedom Guide Dogs. So he's executive director of Freedom Guide Dogs, and he has over 40 years of experience as a guide dog trainer and instructor of the blind. So before founding Freedom Guide Dogs in 1992, he had prior experience with several guide dog organizations, including the Guide Dog Foundation, Guiding Eyes, and Fidelco Guide Dogs, where he learned the distinctive delivery of service, which Freedom calls hometown training. And that's trademark, folks, hometown training, which is a special niche, which I'll let him explain to you. And as executive director, he coordinates all Freedom Guide Dog services for the blind and visually impaired. Our next special guest is Leah Gerlach. And I really appreciate Leah, because I know this is the last minute for you, but Dr. Tracy Williams highly recommended that you come and speak with us. And she has a certificate, actually, in computer access instructor for people with visual impairments from the Access Technology Institute in Sacramento, California. She has a number of certificates in supporting and teaching JAWS for Windows and Freedom Scientific. She's a certificate in adaptive technology applications for people with all types of disabilities. She has a master's degree in rehabilitative counseling and administration for people with all types of disabilities. National certification by the Certification of Rehabilitative Counselor. She also has a bachelor's degree in speech communications and group processes. So, Leah, I guess you're a lifelong learner, which is great. A number of work experiences for low vision at the Dietrich Center for Vision Rehabilitation, Director of Counseling Services there. And she's actually a Para-Optometric Association, has professional membership in that from 1987 to 1990. Got tons of volunteer experiences. We have a power pack national panel, literally, and that's what I'm so happy about this. And we can probably do the whole hour just talking about everyone's backgrounds, but I'm not going to do that. And I want to get started and get it going. So I will start with Eric. I'm going to start with Eric. And tell me what fuels your passion in this area?
Well, it all started, I grew up pretty poor and wasn't allowed to have animals as pets where I lived. And once I could start taking care of other people's animals in the Humane Society in the city, and then I found out there was a real career. I never met a blind person. I lived not too far from seeing eye, and I had no idea there was such a profession. So at 20 years old, I found out about it, was floundering through college, still looking for a career. And I jumped all over and became a guide dog instructor by the age of 21 at the Guide Dog Foundation, because I thought, wow, my first passion is animals and working with dogs, and then I could help somebody and get paid for it. In other words, a real career, and it just blossomed from there. And I was so blessed with my first, my mentor, because way before anybody else could foresee it, he believed in helping blind people with multiple disabilities. And when I was in 1978, my second year as a guide dog apprentice, we trained somebody that was turned on by every school in the country that was had cerebral palsy pretty profoundly and was bent and crooked and flip-flopped and walked along, and we trained her with a guide dog. So I realized right then that you could help more than just the average blind person. And that became my passion along the way. It was quelled a few times, but once I started my own program, I can do as much as I want. And we've even gone further to touch on the gray area, which I hope to present to the international this year. We work with blind people that are, whatever term you want to use these days, cognitively challenged. Some high functioning blind people that are a little bit delayed, in thinking and processing. We've trained a number of them over the years that have a life outside their home. They go to work, they go to volunteer or something every day. They're busier than some average blind people. And so we've worked with them using guide dogs. It's a very strict criteria, but I've touched on that in the last 20 years now.
Well, you mentioned criteria. So to the average person that is having problems seeing, because our consistent theme is when your glasses no longer work, correct? So
Yeah,
do
I
you
like
have to
that.
be completely blind, or are there any other
No.
criteria that will qualify someone?
I guess many
Tell
years
us about
ago,
the
when I first started, they were much more critical about that in the guide dog seeing eye world. But that was changing even back then, 45 years ago or so. And they were starting to think more that people that are visually impaired needed help also. And it's gotten to the point where it's pretty broad thinking. I mean, the average general public can be kind of cold and kind of rude about it when they say, oh, that person can see. Sure, they have, as you all would understand, they have really good acuity in this 10% field of vision, but that's pretty dangerous percent of field of vision when they're trying to travel down a street in a city or anywhere, and the average person doesn't understand that they need to help for that other 90% of field of vision they do have. So we've learned to develop and tailor and restructure things so all blind people. Occasionally, to be honest with you, even I think, well, they have too much vision, and we get reports from the O&M, and we get reports from the eye doctors, and that we try to evaluate it, plus our personal interview and assessment of that person to decide if they really need a dog. And it's a gray area, it's almost like a personal decision on one-on-one. There's no cut and dried.
And I'm glad you brought that up. And I'm glad Dr. Primo is here from Emory University, and maybe, and I'd love to get her insight as someone that works with people with low vision every day. And who's the best person? Would it be the low vision specialist, or would it be, well, you send the person off if you think they're legally blind or close to it? How the nuts and bolts of it myself, that's not my specialty, but could I refer someone to get a guide dog if I thought, yeah, they're gonna have some problems?
Yeah, absolutely. But I was actually going to touch upon, that was a good segue, because Eric mentioned something that I thought I would touch upon just to make sure, maybe as a review from the previous webinars, is, there's different types of vision loss. And so vision loss can come from central vision loss, which would be a condition like macular degeneration or something else that affects your central vision so that you don't see things clearly in the distance. And that can range from mild to profound, and of course to total blindness. But there's also visual field loss that Eric was mentioning, where the side vision is limited from usually advanced diseases like glaucoma. There's some hereditary diseases that cause it. There's some optic neuropathies that cause. So basically it's a tunnel vision where it's almost like looking through a toilet paper roll, if you will, or a straw, however you want to have the analogy. So that's important to realize that even though a person could have very, very good central vision, they could even be 20/20, almost, what we consider normal vision. If they've lost, as he said, 90% of their side vision or close to it, that makes them extremely visually impaired, profoundly visually impaired, because you can't see anything in your peripheral vision. And so you're more apt to bump into things. So usually when I have a patient, even in the work that I do, a patient that is asking or that I think may benefit from a guide dog, I kind of give them the information. We don't have the resources at Emory to really, give a whole course on it. So what we do is we give them the information, but in answer to your question is that yes, you could, as well as I could, send someone and give them the resources to do that. But I just think it's important for people to realize that there's sort of two types, if you will, of vision loss, and it's central and peripheral. And sometimes people have both. They have central loss and peripheral loss, which I sort of call the double whammy, because not only do you not see things clearly in the distance or up close, but now you don't have any side vision as well.
Thank you,
Susan, I appreciate it. What we've done is, because that's not our expertise, is there's been a development just for us as a physical to understand. I have this briefcase. I can't name the company that created it, and it's basically made out of welder's goggles. And they've created all the visual impairments on glass, and including funnels for tunnel vision. And we would wear them to understand, as we had described it, reading it through a manual. So all our trainers understand, because we don't go to school for that specific thing. So we're really sensitive to these, to what the blind person, because I go, so what can you see and what you can't see? I mean, I'm not cavalier about it, but I'd rather them tell me than all the reports told me also. And you know, I'll sit there and I go, okay, foggy object perception. But again, all those different visual impairment apertures, or whatever you want to call them, it was really helpful. We used to make our trainers get on an escalator wearing them.
Great.
You know, they're used to training a dog with an escalator, they can see clearly. It's like, here, put tunnel vision on and get on that escalator. So they really can appreciate and be more sensitive to the blind person you're working with, you know, not for one specific, but for all specific disabilities. Be a little more patient, a little more understanding, because we think we don't know. And we're so much a dog trainer, we have to be much more sensitive to the blind person. So, you know,
I appreciate that, Eric, because, and that's why I'm really happy Leah is part of our panel, because she has all these certifications in terms of helping people with vision impairment and things of that nature, which can kind of bridge that gap with guide dogs and living with vision impairment. So Leah, can you maybe share with us a little bit on
Sure. When working
how that bridges the assertive?
Yeah, when working with people with low vision, it's important to remember that the problem that they're having is called mobility. And whether they decide they want to get a guide dog, or whether they don't want to get a guide dog, but they need to start learning cane training, it's important to find a way to give them the tools to help them move more independently. Some of the challenges that people think is, okay, if I don't see well and I go get a guide dog, I'm not going to have to worry about, you know, travel at all. I still have, as a visually impaired person, I'm legally blind, I have been all my life. There are skills that I need to learn, whether I use a cane or I have a dog, that are important to consider when you're dealing with someone with a vision impairment and mobility challenges. Probably the biggest one is the psychological impact of deciding what to do. Whether you are, when you're visually impaired, particularly low vision, it's hard to come up with the psychological things that, okay, if I use a cane, I'm being publicly outed. Now, if I use a cane, I can fold it up, and if I don't need it, it sits in my purse and no one knows it. But to make the decision to want to get my mobility training and decide to go and get a guide dog, I cannot take Boulder, my 75-pound yellow lab, and put him in my briefcase. So I am publicly outed. And the world at large believes that if you are using a guide dog, seeing eye dog, whatever term you want to use for your dog, that you are totally blind. And the hardest part is knowing, okay, there are certain things I can see. Maybe I have retinitis pigmentosa and a 10-degree field. I can tell whether the stoplight is red or green, but I can't tell where the curb is. So there are things that make the public feel like, okay, this dude is faking it because he's reading his iPhone and using a guide dog. So the biggest first step is helping your patient think about the travel issues that they're having. Is it that they have to travel alone, or are they someone who never travels alone? Do they need to think about using a cane versus getting a dog? Remember, my dog has to rely on me. It's a partnership. I'm the one that feeds him. I'm the one that takes him out. I'm the one that grooms him. I can't beg those jobs off on my husband, even though he'd like to do those, because I have to develop a mutual needs bond with my dog. And that's really a critical part of the whole process. Most
So you have to be a dog lover pretty much, right?
Well, I've actually been in a class with students who had never had an animal before. And one student we had to send home because he had no mobility or sense of orientation skills. If you told him to turn around, he could not tell what a 90-degree turn was or 180-degree turn was. But I also had a student in one of the classes I was with who had never had a pet before, never knew anything about a dog. But she wanted that independence. And having been a cane user and for 26 years, a guide dog user, when I travel independently, and I've traveled across the country many, many times with my guide dog, and only a few times with my cane, there's a bond that gives you confidence when you're using a dog. If I get lost in a city, I can scratch my buddy's ears and think about it. Where if I'm standing there with my cane, I'm pretty much alone, you know. So there's lots to think about.
That's fantastic. I wanna kind of ask him to unmute, because also on our line is Dr. Joel Mccray, who is partially retired. He's actually on staff at the Illinois College of Optometry, but I know that he's older than I am. He's been in the community longer than me, even though I'm a little bit grayer. But anyway, I think he has a lot of insight. He can share a lot of insight in terms of the patients that we see day to day in the urban area. What would their questions be, if we bring up this possibility? Because some people might, it's kind of a standing joke. Well, I guess I need a guide dog, don't I? When this can be something that's very, very helpful. So Dr. Mccray, do you have any additional insight as a referral source that we can present this to patients?
Well, I have questions too.
Okay.
That's why I tuned in. Like you said, I'm a part-time faculty member at the Illinois Eye Institute, or Illinois College of Optometry. And I get patients in because I see a lot of glaucoma patients. And some are not willing to even follow my recommendation. There's certain times when the medications just aren't enough. And I can think of one patient in particular, she refused the surgery. Every time she would come in, I'd bring it up to her. And every time she would say, no, I don't want it, whatever happens, happens. And I said, but you don't have to go blind. But she would still say that. So I eventually referred her to our low vision clinic. I said, well, they can give you insight onto how you can start learning mobility and Braille, since you insist on going blind. I was really hoping that would change her mind too, but it didn't. And so, I'd like to know resources where I can refer people to find out if a guide dog is a good solution for them. And how do they receive it? How much does it cost? Who provides funding, if there's some?
Okay. If you're working with clients in Illinois, first of all, if they're losing vision and you want to make a referral, I would refer to any of the comprehensive low vision services, whether it's Spectrios Institute, the Chicago Lighthouse, any of those have resource databases that can help with that kind of thing. They can also give you referrals for mobility training, because for me and for most visually impaired people, that's the first step, is learning what mobility is all about. As far as getting a guide dog, there are at least 23 schools that I can think of offhand. And as Eric and I were talking, all of the accredited schools cost nothing. If you're going to Guide Dogs for the Blind in California, they will pay for your airfare, your room and board, the cost of the dog, the cost of the training. They'll even cover follow-up services. Some guide dog schools even have a fund if you need help with vet bills. that kind of thing. So other than the day-to-day maintenance of the dog, which means food and water and grooming, it shouldn't cost a person much of anything. Most of the schools, I think all of them, don't they, Eric, all breed their own dogs now?
Yes, they do.
Yeah,
Any of the accredited ones. Yeah.
yeah. And that's what you
Is
want to look
there,
for, is an accredited school.
is
Because
there a
there
long
are,
waiting list?
pardon me?
I'm sorry. Is there a long waiting list to get into those schools?
Since COVID, yes.
Yeah, since COVID, yes. But as I tell people, it's a little like applying to go to college. There's an application and an interview, and depending on your flexibility, you may get in sooner than later. But if you're really thinking about getting a guide dog, start with your mobility training. And if you've had a couple mobility lessons and you go, I want a dog, make that application while you're finishing your mobility training, so you're not lagging behind that much.
So question, do all low vision clinics, Dr. Primo, do you think they all offer mobility training? Is that part of the assessment or part of the follow-up prior to maybe looking at that as a referral?
Well, it's part of our evaluation. It's part of our history taking, if you will. Even when I've never seen a patient before and they're out in the waiting room and I call them back, I can already get a sense of their mobility, if they're struggling, if I need to give them my arm, whatever the case may be. So there's sort of a unspoken evaluation of the mobility skills, just getting back to the waiting room, getting back from the waiting room back to my office. So there's that. But yeah, we have specific questions that ask, how do you feel when you're traveling in an unfamiliar setting, or would you travel in an unfamiliar setting by yourself? And I already know if somebody says, oh, no, I would never go anywhere that I hadn't been before by myself, that gives me a clear indication that obviously they have some mobility issues. If they can only ambulate in their familiar environment, or they only feel comfortable doing that, again, that tells me a lot about both their sort of psychological state, if you will, but as well as their vision. So I think that most low vision or vision rehabilitation centers would have the same type of process and how we evaluate it, but it is very much a part of our evaluation. And then most of us probably, I won't say most, many of us probably don't have a specific O&M certified person on our staff. We don't, for example, at Emory. What I do have is an occupational therapist, however, who has special training in dealing with people who are visually impaired and has her certification in that, and can do some basic mobility, evaluation and instruction, not nearly as intensive and as high level as an O&M instructor. So I think what we do is that when we get to that point and the OT is sort of taken it as far as she feels comfortable or can take it, then we will make the recommendation to see an O&M specialist, which is usually more at an organization like, for us here, Center for Visually Impaired, or some of the other ones across the country that have specific O&M instructors. So again, long answer to your question, but we all acknowledge it, we all think about it, we all evaluate for it, and then we figure out what order of things we want to take it. But we definitely are talking about it with our patients at every visit.
If you're working with veterans, the VA has a strong O&M component to it, and they actually have on staff orientation mobility specialists and train orientation mobility specialists. In Illinois, the Department of Rehabilitation has some. At Spectrios Institute, we have a referral list of certified O&M instructors that we can make referrals to. If you're dealing with children with vision loss, you want to connect them up with their special education program to get an IEP set up, and have mobility included in that, so that they can get mobility training. In most special ed districts or schools, that any public education school in Illinois can access mobility instructors for their students. So that's important to keep in mind, and encourage parents to talk with the school nurse to get their child into the program whether they feel they need all of those services or just occasional referral services. But it's important for children with vision loss, even if they're, I don't want to learn Braille, or no, I don't want to do that. Get them connected to the system so that they can get that built into their education plan. As they need more services, it's available to them.
Thank you for that, because one of the things I want our foundation to do is just be a resource of information, as Dr. Mccray was alluding to, and I kind of feel there's such a lack of knowledge, because in our community, people might go to a corporate place and nothing that can be done, when your glasses no longer work. And a lot of times we find people are just not given the resources, given those referrals properly.
And so ask Dr. Williams or ask Lynn Freiberg, who's the office person there, about the database of referral and resources they have. Before I retired, we put together a very extensive database of referral and resources that we can share with you.
Well, what we will do on our website, we'll create an area and hopefully a link to those resources, just to make it easier, because again, that's what these town hall meetings, I think, are about, educating communities. And that big word free, because a lot, there's this big preconceived notion that I can't even afford it. It's not even a possibility. How can I take care of a dog? How can I handle the vet bills? And when you say all I have to do is just go buy dog food and comb the dog and everything else taken care of.
And those are questions when you're applying for school. You want to know just those are the things you need to ask. I know that for all accredited schools, the training and all of the dog are free, but you want to know, okay, how much of post-training services does your school provide at what or no cost? So those are things that may decide that, okay, I'm going to do Eric's program because it fits into my needs, or I'm going to do Guide Dog for the Blind program or Seeing Eye program because their specifics fit into my needs. And I always tell people, apply, talk with a couple of schools.
Yeah, that's good. I do want to do a list of FAQs, of frequently asked questions. But before I go further, I have to give Janet an opportunity to talk, because again, she's the one that has pulled Eric in on this, because she herself is living very successful and independently with a guide dog. I keep saying guide dog. And I want, if you can tell us about your experiences, and have you had more than one? Is it okay to have more than one at a time? And just tell us about your experiences, and your training and your background, someone that's living this day to day, as well as Leah.
Sure, thank you. I do have a guide dog currently now. My dog happens to also be from Freedom Guide Dogs. My dog is a Bouvier. He is a light gray Bouvier, and he's actually relatively new. I just got him in November, and so far it's working out very well. He is not my first dog. My previous dog that I had from Fidelco Guide Dog Foundation, I had him for 12 years, and he was a German Shepherd. And so he spent a long time with me working when I was in DC in the Obama administration. He went through that whole experience with me. So it was great having him there. I think that it's great to use a guide dog. I definitely agree that you need to be a cane user also and have those mobility skills intact, because it helps to build your confidence and gives you that ability to understand, your own environment. A lot of people think that guide dogs know where we're going. We need to know where we're going so that the guide dog can help us get there. They don't know where we're going necessarily. You need to know your environment. They help with safety and independence, crossing streets. I find them very helpful in places like airports. When I was younger, I never used a guide dog. I used a cane, but later on, it just became very apparent for me that my independence and mobility could actually increase by using a guide dog. So it's been a great experience for me. I think it's also important to recognize that, yes, the guide dog programs do help with the cost of the guide dogs, and they're very expensive, to raise from puppy to placement, about 45,000, I think, Eric, is that right?
We're the low income school.
You're
Ours is
low
20
income, but
We're
yes,
25. The average is 50 in the United States.
yes, yeah.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, so it's a lot goes into it. It is, although it's a profession, I also think that it's a science, because there is a science, to it. But I also think that it's important for anyone thinking about getting a guide dog to understand also that the cost is there, that inevitably you're going to have those vet bills. Inevitably, obviously, you have to have money to pay for the dog food, and medications that the dog may have, or grooming tools. And many of the schools will provide some of those things, the grooming tools, when they do the initial placement. But I do think that it does enhance anyone's, personal experience in their community, in their education, if they're going to college, if they're going and seeking employment. I think that it does make a big, difference. It takes a lot of patience. There is a learning curve. And so it isn't just that you get this dog and all of a sudden you guys are operating seamlessly together. You're learning together, you're learning each other's pace, you're learning the directions, you're learning the neighborhoods or places, the transportation system. There's a lot of things that a dog needs to navigate. They need to learn your voice, your commands, your level of tolerance. And so there's a lot to it. And so there is a great deal of science that actually goes into this, but also I think it's just also, intuition, on the person's part using the dog, but also just helping, that relationship bonding process is so important. And there is a learning curve to it. So it isn't all just you look great traveling together. You can look pretty awkward at first. I can share some experiences. So, but it does take time, for the two to grow together.
Okay. Well, thank you. I'm going to come back to you, Janet, but Eric, and this is your passion. How long does it take? And what's the process in terms of training a guide dog? And then you also have to train the client also. And what are probably the big cliffs or the big barricades in terms of that you run into that might cause someone to fail that whole process?
What Jan is saying, it's a science, because it's not just this guide dog. To create each guide dog, we have a whole breeding colony, and it's like it starts with used to be my wife when we were, it's like, who do I breed to who to create this perfect dog litter of dogs? And then you try that and you get it, and sometimes you can breed the same two dogs twice and not get the same outcome. I don't know, you think about it, I guess in your own family, your siblings, you're nothing like I am. My brother
Exactly
or
right.
sister. And so that's the only thing I can equate it to. We have this litter of 8 puppies that were fantastic. Let's do that again next time around. What the heck is that? It's just so frustrating. And but so it's a 2-year process just to create a guide dog. You breed, you pick the dogs, you breed the dogs. 63 days later, they have puppies. 8 weeks later, you put them out with puppy raisers for 1.5 years that make the perfect pet out of it. Socializing it in the general public, where they get it, where they can take the dog where other people can't. They wear a coat and they take it in restaurants, church, sporting events, everywhere that the general public can go, because they have that grace, because they're a guide dog in training. And then it comes back to us, and then we take it and just mold it to now go that next step to navigate through everything. They know everything in general. Now we're teaching them how to navigate it for a blind person. And that takes 4 to 5 months. And then you're at the end of that, you're starting to look at your whole waiting list of people, which dog would be best suited for each person. And that in itself comes with wisdom and time. I can't imagine. I don't even think back when it was like 35 years ago, trying to, you had, a hierarchy of staff. Then, you got the director of training going, I don't think that would be a good idea if he came up with it, trying to match two people together. It's making a marriage. This dog and this person have to get along 24/7, basically. And so, you're trying to get personalities, lifestyle, environment, activity level, all these things you keep taking. And we don't make that decision in one day. We have all these reports, including the instructor's evaluation of that person. And you just keep going through it and tossing them aside. And a week later, you go through them again, and you're sitting there with all these dogs, you're juggling them and all these blind people until you start to feel confident about a decision. And in our environment of home training, we're usually 90+% right because of the way we do it. In the old days, 12 blind people show up at a guide dog school, and you've got about 20 dogs to choose from. Then you decide. When in a home training program, you don't call that blind person till you have picked that dog for that person. So sometimes they wait longer than others. Our waiting list can be 6 months. It can be a year and a half, depending on person and dog. Some people need a very special dog. So it's a long-term process. And then it doesn't end there. You train the person for 10 days, 2 weeks. And then we're their personal instructor for the next 10 years, the life of the dog, by phone, occasional visits, follow-up visits. Even though we've trained them where they live, they still might need help again. I mean, a lot of times you can do it over the phone because you've been there, done that. But sometimes we need to go back. And if we're ever in the area, we always go back and visit all the clients in the region, whether they like to or not. We'll just say hi. We don't need to go for a walk, or do you want to go for a walk with the dog?
So what's the general life expectancy or working life for?
That's a good question. It's 8 to 10 years in general.
Okay.
When you're thinking about a big city, Boston, New York City, Chicago, a few others, it's lower on the 6 years. Working life can be as low as 6 years. It's just so stressful. If some
Really?
blind person is commuting, I worked in Manhattan. I worked in New York City for most of the 35 years or more. I've only been hiding in Florida for a couple of years, and COVID kicked me out 2 years earlier. So I haven't done New York City in about 4 years out of, it's about 35 years. I worked in New York City, and that's the hardest place. I've looked at dogs, and you know how we gray sometimes because of stress. You can look at a black Labrador, and all of a sudden it looks like they went through a paint storm. They got all this wispy gray on their face, and it's only from stress. Yet they don't show it emotionally, but internally they're stressed. Just a guide dog's world's is not that glamorous. And you think about it, a guide dog's world is knees and feet and car exhaust.
Yeah.
That's where the dog is, down here with knees and feet, dodging people's knees and feet and car exhaust their whole life.
Wow.
They thrive on it. It's the quality of the animal, the breeds we choose. Labradors that are just like, they're the most widely used guide dog in the whole world.
Okay.
Because they're the most durable, enduring, willing. They love to work. They're just a phenomenal animal, and they put up with so much, and they'll work with people that have multiple disabilities and not ever complain or anything. They're just so dedicated. It's a very hard job and very admirable. And you look at them and they go, it's no big deal.
Wow.
The Labrador would tell you, it's no big deal. But
are there any other breeds that you like to use?
Oh yeah, like the one Janet has, the Bouviers. We're starting to use more and more of them. We originally took them on for hypoallergenic dogs, non-shedding, for people that are allergic to dogs. But I had extras, and I said, Janet, you'll love this dog. It's perfect for you. And so I gave her a Bouvier, even though she doesn't need one. I need a hypoallergenic, non-shedding dog. With that comes cost. You have to pay to have a dog clipped every 3 to 4 months.
And
because they don't
that's
shed, they
usually
just
something
grow
that
like
school
a
doesn't
sheep.
pay for.
You have to have them trimmed every few months, so that's
Yeah.
another expense. We use smooth-coated collies, and right now we're the only program in the US that used them. When I met my wife, and before that, way back 30 something years ago, Guiding Eyes was still using them. Guide Dog in Florida and California used them for a while and gave up on them. They're a complicated breed.
Yeah.
They're almost too sensitive. And
Aren't they using
they have vision
golden
problems.
retrievers?
What's that?
Eric, aren't they using golden retrievers and some
Trying, because
poodle
golden,
crosses?
we're going to try to use Goldens again. The Golden Retriever traditional is the orange coated, coated. American Golden Retriever cancer rate is 62%. So we've failed every time. We have bought dogs, breeding dogs, they all get cancer. We've had to cut them losses and just reject puppies because we know the whole litter had cancer or will have cancer. We just acquired an English, which is a wheaten color guy. It's a purely bred out of the UK, and their cancer rate is 30%. So
I have a question. I think
sure.
being not being a dog person, I'm sure there might be some individuals that already have dogs. Is it possible for them to ask for you to train their own dog to be a guide dog?
No, most of us won't do that because their dog isn't. Well, go ahead, Leah. You be a good one to speak on that.
I was going to say partly because the dogs that are trained for guide work are trained when they're young. There's things that they have to learn as growing up from pups. I know a lot of people who have a guide dog and a family pet, but it's hard to take someone else's dog. You can't guarantee what you're going to wind up with.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I know Janet has a hard stop, so we can go over a few minutes, but I do want to respect her time. And I just, you've always been a wealth of information with your own real life experiences. Because one thing that's curious, how does one travel in an airport or a train station with a guide dog, and what are the special challenges? Do they have to buy an extra ticket and things of that nature?
No, well, in terms of the ticket question, no, the guide dogs for people who are blind traveling with a guide dog, you do not. The dog travels with you free of charge, and they sit at your feet on the plane. The airports as well as the airlines are very accommodating with regard to traveling with a service animal. There has been a significant challenge and barriers for blind individuals in the last several years because of the increase of individuals traveling with quote unquote therapy dogs. And, it's been a real major problem for individuals who are blind using seeing eye dogs because some of these dogs are not trained appropriately. They're trained by themselves or somebody else. And so the Department of Transportation has recently revised at the beginning of this month. The Department of Transportation has changed their rulings on individuals traveling with therapy dogs because they had such a significant increase in both flight attendants and airport personnel being bitten, as well as some individuals who are blind traveling with their guide dogs at the airports and on planes being attacked, by some of the animals that are supposedly trained and used for therapy dogs. So, but they're great in airports and other places like that because, particularly if you travel frequently. I do travel frequently in airports, so it's great because once you know your routine, the dog knows the routine, and the dog gets to know the airport. And, there are apps that I use to help with finding out where all the dog relief areas are, in various airports across the country. So there are distinct advantages, but also there's support in the airport. You can arrange for support to have personnel at the airport meet you if you're traveling alone with your service dog. You can still ask for that support to get you to your gate. It's absolutely crazy lately, with everything going on now, with COVID and flight delays and flight cancellations, which is a real problem for people who are blind traveling with their guide dogs. or any disability for that matter, because of the frequency of flight cancellations and you're traveling with a dog. You don't want to be trapped on a plane and not be able to get out and relieve your dog. So there's that support available, for you. It takes a lot of communication, and the airport has changed its regulations on making sure that you register as a person who will be traveling on a plane with your service animal, and then they acknowledge that, and then it's on file until with the number of years. I think mine goes to 2025. So once you file the paperwork, it's on file for that period of time. So there are distinct advantages available.
Right. No, thank you very much for that. Because these are a lot of things that people don't think about, and they think of it more as a barrier to getting a guide dog, when I don't believe so. It's just making sure that everyone's questions are answered and things of that nature. And thank you very, very much for that insight. So we also talked about there's home training versus guide dog school. And Eric and Leah, can you elaborate on what the differences are? Because you mentioned, home training. Somebody can come to my house and train my dog for me.
Bring you a trained guide dog that we've trained and train you where you live. You still have to work the first several days, depending on your abilities and the dog and you bonding, to do the basics, walking a straight line, crossing streets. It might not be where you ever go, but it's in your town. And then once you've accomplished the basics, we can start addressing your personal mobility needs and going to that church, that store, that restaurant, that building, your place of work, anything that you can imagine. And then again, we still have a criteria that we want to cover, anywhere from public transportation to escalators and the like. So we try to do all that comprehensively within that 2 weeks of training, but it's one-on-one. That's the ideal thing. You're not interrupted as much. The concept is because there's so many people that can't go away. Young mothers with children, blind women with children, they don't trust their children with their husbands for 3.5 weeks. So they would not go away to get a guide dog. I've trained so many mothers hauling a kid in a car, stroller behind them or on their front or on their back while we're training. And then when I leave, they're back in their own home with their own child nurturing until I show up again. It's much easier for them to get a babysitter to come in for the 2 to 3 hour session that I'm there, and we can go out without the child. But women are very fiercely protective of their children, and us husbands. I remember so many times my wife used to volunteer with Skip Church on a Sunday morning. Why? It's the most convenient time to do anything but church. But anyway, that's just me. Sporting event. She would be neutering wild cats with this group on Sunday mornings. Anyway, I take our daughters to church. They're both Down syndrome. And I take them to church with my son. And then she comes home midday and she goes, "You let the girls go to church dressed like that?" I'm like, "What's wrong with that?" It's a fashion statement she's getting after me about. So from the little minute things to the more important things, women usually forego getting a guide dog and then do struggle to do everything, to be that mom, and while the husband's out working or they're a single mom. And so we can come in and fill work in between their schedule. And the same thing with people that are work dependent. They can get a guide dog in 10 days to 12 days instead of most people only get 2 weeks vacation a year. And they used to have to give that up and then lose 2 weeks a year, many years ago. When it's 23, 3.5 weeks of training, you're out, you lose your vacation plus some pay. And most of us are paycheck dependent, per se. So they sometimes would forgo getting a guide dog or really have to tough it out without some income just to get a guide dog. So we've filled that gap. And I say Fidelco Guide Dog, my mentor started the program with the millionaire shepherd breeder. And then we took it one step further to go from German Shepherds to Labrador Retrievers. I had enough of German Shepherds after 5 years. I love the founders and everything and my mentor, but the Labrador is a much more versatile breed than a German Shepherd. So we
I have
took
a
it.
question.
Yes, sir.
I had a question. Is there a easy way of differentiating a guide dog from a service dog? Let's say when you're in the airport or somewhere.
It usually has to do with their harness. A guide dog harness has a rigid handle. It usually will say something about guide dogs or seeing eye dogs on it.
On the shoulder, if you look on any guide dog harness,
Let me grab
on the
one.
back strap, right on the back, she's going to hold hers up. It's right in between the harness handle on the dog's shoulders. Here, she'll show you.
It's usually either right here.
There or hers. There's the blazing.
But the important part is the handle. This is the grip that says to my dog, I'm asking you to guide. If I'm holding his leash, he's going, okay, tell me when you want me to work. But when I grab my handle, he says, okay, it's my job. I attended a brick and mortar residence program. In 96, I went for my first guide dog, and it was 4 weeks as a first guide dog user. Now, most of the residence programs are a 2-week program, and there are benefits to a residence program, just like there are benefits to a one-on-one program or a in-home program. The benefits from a residence program is the camaraderie with other visually impaired people. The fact that you're not being distracted by doing the dishes or cooking the meal or doing, well, you got to do your own laundry, but I don't have to worry about what my kids are doing. I don't have to worry that my husband's putting his feet on the furniture and having a beer and watching a ball game all day, or whatever the distraction might be.
What do you mean? We don't do that. Who told you we do that?
I can just focus on my guide. And for first-time guide dog users, the residence program is very, very good because you are eliminating those distractions. You're also learning, and I know you learn this in an in-home program, if you're partially sighted, you're learning to trust a dog. Many times the biggest challenge that a low vision person has is they might see something coming and they want to react to it. And they're basically telling their dog, I don't trust you, or I don't trust myself to trust you. So learning that trust relationship it takes time, but it can be very freeing to know that that dog has the skill that if I'm looking and I see something, he sees it or she sees it just as better and will help me react appropriately.
I have one question too. Again, Dr. Primo, Dr. Mccray, you guys on the front lines also. Say we feel a patient's pretty mobile, they don't have any real physical limitations. Can we just pick a school from our list and send them directly to apply for guide dog training if they're open to it? And and then is there any kind of preparation that person must go through before, while they're in the process of getting a guide dog?
They need mobility training. I mean, before they think about a dog, it's not I'm visually impaired, I have to get a dog. It's not, that's not 100%, you have to do that. I know millions of, well, maybe not millions, hundreds of thousands of blind and visually impaired people that will not choose a dog. They'd prefer cane. But the first step is the mobility training and learning how to listen for traffic and how to use sighted guide and how to ask for help. Those things are very important before you start thinking about, okay, I want a dog. And picking a school, it's hard to pick a school for someone else. You might say, okay, Eric has this great in-home program, and in that same area, you might say, but Seeing Eye is a residential program. You want to look into a couple, so you can find out the specifics for each program so that they fit your needs.
One quick thing, there's ours. This is the majority of programs, you'll see them. The name is right in between the ears. The harness handle would be here. Maybe I'm holding it upside down.
Yeah.
Now it's
we
upside
sit on
down.
the dog's back, and this is where most of them seeing eye, guiding eyes, and everything would be right there.
Yeah.
Theirs is much more visible, which is a good thing.
Yeah, this runs along the back of my dog, right about behind his ears.
But
And
the
this
name's
is-
up high and tight, so everybody can see it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's up here, but they've also added in the handle.
Oh, they do have it on the body piece too? I didn't know that.
They do that, and they have
I couldn't see that.
they have a releasable handle. So
Yeah.
when I'm traveling, it used to be when you got on a plane and your dog was in its harness, you'd get stabbed by the harness handle. Now they've got a quick release handle that says, okay, I can slide this in the pocket on the plane and the dog can curl up and I'm not going to get my leg black and blue.
Okay.
But
No, thank you.
It's
Thank
a
you.
good
It's
point.
nice to see.
Planes are tight. Planes are tight.
Things are ever evolving, so I really appreciate that
When you-
demonstration.
when you're traveling on a plane or making reservations, two things to keep in mind if you're visually impaired. Plan as far in advance as you can and make sure that the airlines, with the new ability to register through TSA as a person with a disability, that's helpful. But wherever you're going, make sure that your hotel knows you're traveling with a guide dog. And I always tell people, remember that it's important to keep your identification with you. I keep my guide dog identification with me, and I often show that to the gate agent or show that to the hotel reservation people, just so they know where I got my guide dog, that if they find something that they think I'm not doing right, they can call the school, or if I'm having a problem. But a lot of people get offended. Oh, you want to see my identification for my dog? Don't you trust me? I think most schools try and enforce the fact that as a person using a guide dog, you're an ambassador for everybody else using a qualified service dog. And anyway, that's my little sidebar lecture, but
Okay.
when you're traveling, you are, as a person with a guide dog, you're actually representing every other person who ever uses a qualified service dog.
Thank you very much. And again, we're a little over, but Dr. Mccray, Dr. Primo, do you all have any parting questions?
No, I actually learned a lot. I knew a little bit, but I learned a lot more. So thank you to both of you for enlightening me and giving me some great information that I can pass along too. Thank you.
And Eric?
Yep, I
Parting
think the
remarks?
only thing I was keep thinking of Susan there, Dr. Primo, because she in her field, one of the most difficult, challenging group of blind people we work with are RP. Once their hearing is going as well as their sight, that's a difficult group. I mean, I love them dearly and work with them, but you're working with two disabilities now.
Yeah.
And they're visually impaired and they're hearing impaired, and they think they can see more they can see and hear more than they can hear. So it's like, stop relying on that and let's work with the dog and your two abilities, because they can be a little cavalier. So it's a real challenge, because you're now dealing with hearing impairment for reading traffic, which is
Right. When you've got Usher syndrome, you're dealing with
Yes, there's
two
another one.
disabilities, and that's a really tough challenge. And given the correct, the best trained dog for that particular individual can be very liberating.
And the best
So
program for
basically-
that is Leader Dogs for the Blind in Rochester, Michigan. They have a deaf blind program
Right.
that specifically works with totally deaf, totally blind people, which I've seen it done, but it just boggles my mind. That's one special need I don't get involved in. That's a specialty in all itself. They have their own division,
Mhm.
right from housing to everything for that. So
Yeah.
And
So
then
Eric,
that goes
schools
with-
like that in your own, do you all service people all over the country, or do you all have a regional
We're
limitation?
probably one of the only, if the only, oh, the one in Texas, it does only Texas. And we do only the East Coast due to economy. You know, we're only around 30 years. We're not the best at fundraising compared to most, like Leah said, most of the guide dog schools are endowed. They're very well off that they're endowed. Their budget's paid for every year by their endowment. I still have to raise all the money, and I'm nowhere near raising as much as I would like to run the program. So we limit it to the East Coast where we can drive many places. I do fly occasionally, but most of it we drive. And now that I'm based out of Florida, it's a lot easier. I serve Georgia and the Carolinas and Florida myself. And then my
Well,
staff
hopefully-
serves the rest of the Northeast.
Well, hopefully Healthy Living with a Vision Foundation will get to the point where we can be a resource for you financially too.
Well, that'd be wonderful. We appreciate it. You know, maybe
But-
sponsoring specific blind people or whatever you
Yeah.
think.
Thank
And
you.
I was going
Go
to
ahead,
say,
Leah.
I was going to say, if you're working with Lions clubs, they are really good at helping sponsor clients. I was sponsored by a Lions club in Illinois when I went to guide dogs for my last dog. But service groups like Lions and Rotary are often good groups to
Very
seek funding for that.
Okay.
Yeah, to a point.
That's
Most of
The clubs I travel in aren't that wealthy.
Most of
This
the
has
ma-
been a wealth of information. We are 7 minutes over.
Okay.
We have to do this again, but one of the premises of our foundation in terms of eliminating healthcare disparities in communities of color, also utilizing technology. So I really want to get into tech, technology and apps. It was mentioned that, you know, you can use an app to kind of locate where the places are for your guide dogs to relieve themselves, things of that nature, in the airport. There are devices like Orcam, which is a camera device people can wear, and using that in conjunction with a guide dog. So there's so much out there that we need to inform the public about. And so those of you that are online that are listening to this, please donate anything that you can at healthylivingwithavision.org. If you like the content, it's going to get better and better and better. And this has just been a phenomenal experience. I've learned a lot. Dr. Primo, Dr. Mccray's learned a lot as practitioners in the community to help spread the word on guide dogs, and also different technologies for people that are visually impaired. So I want to thank everyone that's listening. Again, healthylivingwithavision.org. Go on our website, make a donation. I don't care if it's $500, $5,000 would be nice, but whatever you can help. It's been a blessing and pleasure. Again, my name is Dr. Ansel Johnson. I am the CEO of Healthy Living with a Vision Foundation, and we bid you adieu. Be well, see well, be blessed.
And it's a pleasure meeting all of you.
It was a
Thank you.
pleasure meeting all of you.
Thank you. We'll be in touch.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Definitely.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.